Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, watching the stars drift past the main view screen. 3 months into their deep space mission, his crew had found nothing but empty space and old asteroid fields. The United Earth Space Command had sent them to investigate strange energy readings at the edge of known space, but so far, they had discovered only rocks and dust. "Captain, we're picking up something unusual," called out Lieutenant Danny Walsh from the sensor station. His young face was lit up with excitement as he studied his readings. "There's a massive structure about 2 light hours ahead. It's not showing up on normal scans, but the energy detectors are going crazy." Jake turned to his science officer, Dr. Lisa Kane. She was already moving toward her station, her dark hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Lisa had spent most of her career studying dead alien ruins, but she had never lost her enthusiasm for discovery. "What do you think, Doc?" Lisa's fingers danced across her console as she pulled up the sensor data. "The energy signature is unlike anything I've seen before. It's not natural, that's for sure. Whatever it is, it's been out there for a very long time." She looked up at Jake with bright eyes. "Captain, I think we might have found something big." "Commander." Ryan Bell, Jake's tactical officer, stepped forward. The tall man always looked worried during missions like this, and today was no different. "Sir, should we call for backup before we investigate? Unknown alien structures could be dangerous." Jake considered this for a moment. Ryan was right to be cautious, but they were months away from the nearest Earth fleet. If they waited for help, some other ship might stumble across this discovery first. "We'll take it slow and careful, Ryan, but we're going to take a look." The Horizon changed course toward the mysterious readings. As they got closer, the structure began to appear on their visual screens. What they saw took everyone's breath away. Floating in the darkness of space was a field of massive crystal formations, each one larger than a city. The crystals glowed, with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. "My God," whispered Lisa. "Jake, these formations are ancient. I'm reading dating signatures that put them at over 10 million years old. That's older than any known civilization in the galaxy." Danny's voice cracked with excitement. "Captain, the energy readings are off the charts. These crystals are still active after all this time. They're generating some kind of field that extends for thousands of kilometers." Jake walked closer to the view screen, studying the alien structures. Each crystal was perfectly formed, with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as he watched. "Lisa, can you tell what they're made of?" "The computer is having trouble identifying the material. It's not like anything in our databases." "But Captain, I'm detecting something else. These crystals aren't just generating energy. They're storing information. Massive amounts of data are encoded in their structure." Ryan frowned. "Data? What kind of data?" "I won't know until we get closer and run detailed scans. But if I'm right, these crystals might be some kind of archive or library. Jake, we could be looking at the records of a civilization that died out millions of years ago." Jake felt his heart racing. This was exactly the kind of discovery that every space explorer dreamed of finding. "Take us in closer, but keep our shields up. Danny, scan for any signs of active defenses or automated systems." As the Horizon moved deeper into the crystal field, more details became visible. The formations weren't random. They were arranged in careful patterns, forming what looked like a massive 3-dimensional city. Smaller crystals connected the larger ones, creating bridges and pathways through the structure. "Captain," Danny called out, "I'm detecting movement. Some of the smaller crystals are shifting position. It's like they're reacting to our presence." Lisa was bent over her console, her excitement growing by the minute. "Jake, I'm picking up transmission signals. The crystals are trying to communicate with us. The signals are based on mathematical principles, like a universal language. You decode them?" "I'm working on it. The patterns are complex, but they're definitely structured. Give me some time and I think I can start to understand what they're saying." Jake turned to Ryan. "Any signs of danger?" "None so far, sir. The crystals don't seem to have any weapons that I can detect. But Captain, I'm reading some kind of scanning beam directed at our ship. They're studying us just as much as we're studying them." "Let them look," Jake said. "If they wanted to hurt us, they probably would have done it already. Lisa, How long do you need to decode those signals? At least a few hours, maybe longer. The mathematical base is incredibly sophisticated. Whoever built these things was far more advanced than we are. Jake nodded. Do what you can. Danny, launch a probe to get us detailed scans of the crystal structure. I want to know everything about these things before we make any direct contact. The probe launched from the horizon and began its careful approach to the nearest crystal formation. As it got closer, the crystal's blue glow intensified, and new patterns of light began flowing across its surface. The probe sensors recorded everything, sending a steady stream of data back to the ship. Captain, Lisa said suddenly, I think I'm starting to understand some of the basic concepts. The signals contain historical records, but not just any. History. These are records of multiple civilizations across the galaxy, spanning millions of years. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Multiple civilizations? How many? Hundreds, maybe thousands. And Jake, there's something else. The records mention Earth. They mention humanity. The bridge fell silent. Everyone turned to look at Lisa, who was staring at her screen with wide eyes. That's impossible, Ryan said. Humans have only been in space for a few hundred years. These crystals are millions of years old. Lisa shook her head. I know it sounds crazy, but the data is clear. There are references to a world called Earth, and to a species that matches our description. The records call us the chosen ones or something similar. I'm still working on the exact translation. Jake's mind raced. How could ancient aliens have known about humanity before humans even existed as a spacefaring species? Lisa, are you sure about this? I'm running the translation through multiple algorithms, but yes, I'm sure. There's more, Jake. The records talk about a race called the Architects. They were the ones who built these crystals, and according to what I'm reading, they didn't just observe civilizations. They guided them. Danny's sensor alarm suddenly went off. Captain, we've got company. Multiple ships are approaching from different directions. They're not human designs. Jake moved to the tactical display. 6 alien vessels were converging on their position from various points around the crystal field. Each ship was different in design, suggesting they came from different species. How long until they reach us? Jake asked. 20 minutes for the closest one, Danny replied. Ryan was already at his station, bringing the ship's defenses online. Captain, should we withdraw? We're outnumbered, and we don't know their intentions. Jake looked at the crystal field, then at the approaching alien ships. Whatever secrets were hidden in these ancient archives, other species clearly knew about them too. The fact that they were all arriving at the same time couldn't be a coincidence. Lisa, how much more time do you need to decode those records? I'm just starting to scratch the surface. There are layers and layers of information encoded in these crystals. I could spend months here and still not understand everything. We don't have months. Jake made his decision. Download everything you can in the next 15 minutes, then we're getting out of here. As Lisa worked frantically to copy the alien data, Jake watched the approaching ships. Humanity had just stumbled onto something that would change everything they thought they knew about their place in the universe. The question was whether they would live long enough to understand what they had found. The ancient gods had chosen a favored species, and somehow, impossibly, they had chosen humanity. Now, Jake and his crew had to figure out what that meant, and why other alien races seemed so interested in keeping that knowledge for themselves. The emergency council meeting on Earth had been going on for 6 hours. Admiral Susan Wright sat at the head of the long table, surrounded by the most important people in human space. The data from Captain Morrison's discovery had reached Earth 3 days ago, and nobody could agree on what to do about it. The implications are staggering, said Dr. Pete Collins, leaning forward in his chair. The elderly scientist had spent his entire career studying alien technology, but nothing had prepared him for this. These architect records suggest they've been watching humanity for thousands of years, maybe longer. They guided our development from the shadows. Colonel Amy Rodriguez, head of the Xenological Defense Division, shook her head. With respect, Doctor, we only have fragments of data. We don't know if any of this is true. It could be an elaborate hoax or some kind of trap. The mathematics don't lie, Pete replied firmly. The crystal archives used principles we're only beginning to understand. No known species has this level of technology. These architects were real and they left us a message. Admiral Wright held up her hand for silence. What about the alien ships that showed up at Morrison's location? Do we know what they wanted? Captain Morrison managed to escape before they could intercept him, Amy said. But our intelligence suggests these weren't random encounters. Multiple species knew about the crystal field and were monitoring it. They were waiting for something to happen. Pete nodded. That supports the theory that other civilizations know about the architect prophecy. They've been watching us, waiting to see if we would find the archives. Prophecy? Admiral Wright raised an eyebrow. You make it sound like some kind of religious text. In a way it is. The architect records speak of choosing a successor species, one that would inherit their knowledge and responsibility. According to the translations, they were looking for a race that could show wisdom, compassion, and unity in the face of great challenges. Amy snorted. And they chose us? Have you looked at human history lately? We've been fighting wars since we discovered fire. That's exactly the point, Pete said excitedly. Humans fight, yes, but we also forgive. We build alliances with former enemies. We risk our lives to save strangers. The architects weren't looking for a perfect species. They were looking for one with the potential to grow. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message from the communications center. A young technician burst into the room, his face pale with excitement. Admiral, you need to see this. Something's happening all across human space. Ancient systems are activating. Admiral Wright stood up quickly. What kind of systems? We don't know, ma'am. Underground installations on Earth? Hidden structures? On our colony worlds, even some asteroids in the outer system. They're all coming online at the same time. The room fell silent. Pete was the first to speak. The architect caches. They're responding to our discovery of the crystal archives. Amy was already moving toward the door. We need to secure these sites immediately. If there's architect technology activating, we can't let it fall into the wrong hands. Wait, Admiral, Wright called out. Pete, what do you think is happening? The old scientist looked thoughtful. The architects were incredibly advanced. They probably built safeguards into their systems. The discovery of the crystal archives might have been a trigger, a signal that humanity was ready for the next stage. What next stage? I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. Meanwhile, on the mining world of New Colorado, strange things were happening. Miner Joe Clark was deep underground when the walls of his tunnel began to glow. The rock face split open, revealing a chamber filled with floating geometric shapes that hummed with energy. Control, this is Joe in Tunnel 7. You're not going to believe what I'm seeing down here. The response came back immediately. Joe, get out of there now. We're reading massive energy spikes from your location. But Joe couldn't move. The geometric shapes were beautiful, hypnotic. As he watched, they began to arrange themselves into patterns that somehow made sense to him. Information flowed into his mind, concepts and ideas that he had never learned, but somehow understood. He was not alone. Across human space, similar discoveries were being made. On Earth, construction workers found hidden chambers beneath the pyramids. On Mars, farmers discovered glowing caves that had been sealed for millennia. On the outer colonies, miners and explorers stumbled upon installations that defied explanation. Each discovery followed the same pattern. Ancient technology would activate, and humans who encountered it would experience strange changes. They became smarter, more intuitive, better able to understand complex problems, but they also became more empathetic, more aware of the connections between all living things. Dr. Collins arrived at the Earth site 3 days later. The chamber beneath the Great Pyramid was vast, filled with the same crystalline technology that Morrison had found in space. But this installation was different. It was clearly designed for human interaction. The architects planned this, Pete said to his assistant, Dr. Nancy Green. They knew we would find the archives eventually. These installations are the next step in their plan. Nancy was studying the readings from her scanner. Pete, the energy patterns here match the ones from Morrison's discovery. But there's something else. The installation is trying to communicate with us. In what way? It's generating patterns that correspond to human brainwave frequencies. I think it wants to interface directly with our minds. Pete felt a chill of fear and excitement. That's how the architects plan to pass on their knowledge. Not through books or computers, but through direct mental contact. Is it safe? I don't know. But I think we have to try. The reports from the other sites all mention the same thing. Humans who interact with the technology are changed, but they're not harmed. If anything, they seem to become more than they were before. Pete approached the central crystal formation. As he got closer, he could feel something reaching out to him, a presence that was ancient and wise. He placed his hand on the crystal surface. The world exploded into light and color. Information flooded into Pete's mind, but not in the way he expected. Instead of facts and figures, he received emotions, experiences, memories that belonged to beings who had lived millions of years ago. He saw the architects as they truly were. Not the cold, logical beings he had imagined, but creatures of incredible compassion and wisdom. They had watched the galaxy for eons, guiding young species, helping them avoid the mistakes that had destroyed so many others. And they had chosen humanity not for their strength or intelligence, but for their heart. The architects had seen something in humans that even humans didn't recognize in themselves. The ability to find hope in darkness, to show mercy to enemies, to sacrifice for strangers. When Pete opened his eyes, he was lying on the chamber floor. Nancy was kneeling beside him, her face full of concern. "Pete, are you all right?" "You were unconscious for almost an hour." Pete sat up slowly, his mind still processing what he had experienced. "Nancy, I understand now. The architects didn't just choose us randomly. They saw our potential, our capacity for growth, but they also saw something else." "What?" "They saw that we would be tested. Other species in the galaxy, older and more powerful than us, would not accept the architects' choice. They would challenge us, try to prove that we're not worthy of the inheritance." Nancy helped Pete to his feet. "What kind of test?" "I don't know exactly, but I know it's coming. The architects left us tools, enhancements that will help us face what's ahead. But the real test won't be of our technology or our weapons, it will be of our character." As they left the chamber, Pete couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Somewhere out in space, other civilizations were preparing for humanity's emergence as the architects' chosen successors. Some would welcome them, but others would see them as a threat to the established order. The architects had awakened something in humanity, unlocked potential that had been dormant for millennia. But with that awakening came responsibility and danger. The galaxy was about to discover what the ancient gods had seen in the young species from Earth. Pete looked up at the stars and wondered if humanity was ready for what was coming. The architects had chosen them, but now they would have to prove themselves worthy of that choice. The real test was just beginning. The message came through every communication channel in human space at exactly the same time. Captain Steve Murphy was having breakfast aboard the UES Endeavour when the bridge called down to his quarters with urgent news. "Captain, you need to get up here right now," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Kelly Brooks. "We're receiving a transmission from something called the Galactic Hegemony." Steve rushed to the bridge, still pulling on his uniform jacket. The main screen showed a collection of alien faces, each one representing a different species. At the center sat a tall, gray-skinned being with large black eyes. "I am Prime Minister Zektar of the Hegemony Council," the alien said in perfect English. "We address the species known as humans. Your recent discovery of architect technology has created a serious problem for galactic stability." Steve looked at his crew. They were all staring at the screen with mixed expressions of fear and curiosity. This was humanity's first official contact with a galactic government, and it wasn't going well. The architects left specific instructions about their chosen successors, Zektar continued. According to ancient law, any species claiming this inheritance must prove their worthiness through a series of trials. If you fail these tests, your species will be destroyed for the safety of the galaxy. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Steve turned to his tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Frank Liu. "Frank, get me a secure line to Earth Command. We need to report this immediately." Within hours, the YC news had reached every human world. Admiral Wright called another emergency meeting, this time including Captain Morrison, who had returned from his mission, and Ambassador Helen Torres, Earth's most experienced diplomat. "The hegemony represents over 300 alien species," Helen explained to the group. "According to our intelligence, they've been the dominant power in this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. If they say we have to take these trials, we probably don't have a choice." Jake Morrison leaned forward. "What kind of trials are we talking about?" "We don't know yet, but based on what Dr. Collins learned from the architect installations, these tests won't be about military strength or technology. They'll be about character, wisdom, and moral judgment." Dr. Collins nodded. "The architects chose us because of our capacity for compassion and growth. The trials will probably test those qualities under extreme pressure." Amy Rodriguez looked skeptical. "And if we fail?" "Then the hegemony destroys humanity," Admiral Wright said simply. "They see us as a threat to their established order. The idea that some young species from the edge of space could be chosen over civilizations that have existed for millennia makes them angry." The first trial came 2 weeks later. Steve Murphy found himself leading a diplomatic mission to a world called Kepler 442b. His team included Ambassador Torres and General Frank Liu, along with a small support crew. They had been ordered to resolve a civil war between two alien factions without using any advanced technology or weapons. The planet was a mess. Two groups called the Northers and the Southers had been fighting for over a century. Their cities were in ruins and millions of civilians were caught in the middle of the conflict. The hegemony had tried to stop the war several times but had always failed. "Your task is simple," explained the hegemony observer, a reptilian being named Seklon. "End this conflict permanently. You have 30 days. Use of any technology beyond basic tools is forbidden. Violence is not permitted." Helen looked at the devastated landscape through their shuttle window. 30 days to solve a war that's lasted 100 years, and we can't use force or advanced tech. They're not making this easy. Steve smiled grimly. If it was easy, it wouldn't be much of a test. They set up a basic camp between the two warring territories and began the slow process of making contact. The Northers were a proud, warrior-like people who believed strength determined leadership. The Southers were more diplomatic but had grown bitter after decades of losses. The first week was frustrating. Both sides refused to even speak to each other, let alone negotiate. They had tried peace talks before, always with the same result. The hatred ran too deep, they said. Too much blood had been spilled. But Steve and his team did something the previous mediators hadn't done. Instead of trying to bring the leaders together immediately, they lived among the common people. They worked in the fields, helped rebuild damaged homes, and listened to stories of loss and pain. Helen spent hours with mothers who had lost children in the fighting. Frank worked alongside former soldiers who were tired of war but didn't know how to stop. Steve talked with farmers whose crops had been destroyed year after year by armies marching back and forth across their land. Slowly, a picture emerged. The war hadn't started over territory or resources as everyone claimed. It had begun with a misunderstanding about water rights during a drought. Both sides had been desperate, scared, and quick to assume the worst about their neighbors. The original cause of the conflict is almost meaningless now, Helen told Steve after 2 weeks of investigation. But the pattern that followed is very human. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to violence, and violence creates more fear. It's a cycle that feeds itself. So how do we break it? We show them another way. Not through speeches or treaties, but through example. The breakthrough came during the 3rd week. A flood damaged a dam that supplied water to both territories. The disaster threatened to poison the water supply for thousands of people. The local leaders were so focused on blaming each other that they ignored the real crisis. Steve made a decision that went against all diplomatic protocol. Without asking permission from either side, he organized teams of volunteers from both territories to work together on emergency repairs. He used simple tools and basic engineering knowledge, staying within the trial rules. At first, the workers from both sides eyed each other suspiciously, but as the hours passed and the crisis deepened, something changed. A Northern engineer and a Southern technician found themselves working side by side, sharing ideas and tools. A group of Southern women brought food to Northern workers who had been laboring for 18 hours straight. "Look at them," Helen whispered to Steve as they watched the mixed teams working together. "When they focus on solving problems instead of fighting, they're actually quite similar." The dam was repaired just in time to prevent disaster. More importantly, people from both sides had worked together successfully for the first time in decades. The experience had shown them that cooperation was possible. Steve called for a meeting of the territorial leaders. This time, instead of formal negotiations, he organized it as a work session. The question wasn't who was right or wrong about the past, but how to prevent future disasters like the flood. "Your people proved they can work together when it matters," Steve told the assembled leaders. "The question is whether you're brave enough to let them." The solution, when it came, was surprisingly simple. Instead of trying to divide territory or assign blame, they created a joint council responsible for managing shared resources like water and emergency response. Both sides kept their cultural identity and local governance, but they agreed to cooperate on issues that affected everyone. The hegemony observer, Seklon, watched the signing ceremony with obvious surprise. "In 30 days you have accomplished what our best diplomats could not do in years." "How?" Helen smiled. "We didn't try to impose a solution from the outside. We helped them find one for themselves. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to give people the tools and space to solve it themselves." Meanwhile, on other worlds, different human teams were facing their own trials. Dr. Maria Santos was treating a plague that affected an insectoid species, even though those same insects had attacked human colonies in the past. Commander Paul Grant was coordinating the rescue of hegemony civilians from a dying star system, risking human lives to save people who had never shown humans any kindness. Each successful trial revealed more about the architect legacy. Jake Morrison discovered he could interface with alien computer systems just by touching them. Lisa Kane found she could understand any language after hearing just a few words. The changes were subtle but growing stronger, but not everyone in the hegemony was happy with humanity's success. War Master Thekron of the Corvan Empire watched the trials with growing anger. His species had ruled through strength for thousands of years. The idea that compassion and cooperation could be more powerful than military might was an insult to everything he believed. As humanity passed trial after trial, Thekron began planning his own test. One that would prove once and for all that these soft, weak humans were not worthy to inherit the power of the architects. General Marcus Stone was reviewing battle reports when the alarm started screaming across Earth's orbital defense stations. Within minutes, his tactical display lit up with red warning signals as enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace throughout the solar system. "Sir, we've got massive incoming fleets," reported Captain Linda Hayes from the command center. "Corvan Empire ships supported by at least 6 other hegemony species. They're moving to attack positions around all our major worlds." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Humanity had been so close to completing the trials successfully. Now it looked like the Corvans had decided to end the test permanently. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Over 2,000, sir. Our entire defense fleet numbers less than 300. Marcus opened a communication channel to Admiral Wright, who was aboard the flagship UES Victory near Mars. "Susan, please tell me you have some kind of plan for this." Admiral Wright's face appeared on the screen, grim but determined. "We knew this might happen, Marcus. The Corvans have been growing more aggressive with each trial we passed. They've convinced several other species that humanity's rapid advancement threatens galactic stability. What about the Hegemony Council? Won't they stop this?" "The council is split. About half the species support our right to complete the trials. The other half agrees with the Corvans that we're too dangerous to let live." On the bridge of his massive warship, War Master Thekron studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. His gray, scarred face showed no emotion as he watched human ships scrambling to defensive positions. "Commander Vexel, begin the attack on their outer colonies," he ordered. "Show these humans what real power looks like." His second-in-command, a younger Corvan with bright yellow eyes, looked uncertain. "War Master, the Council has not officially authorized this action. If we attack now, we risk breaking the ancient laws." Thekron turned his cold gaze on the younger officer. "The ancient laws are being broken by allowing these primitive creatures to claim the architect inheritance. We are restoring proper order to the galaxy." The first attacks began at the mining colony of Titan Base. The Corvan ships appeared, without warning, their weapons charging as they approached the defenseless orbital platforms. But something unexpected happened. Captain Jake Morrison was visiting the colony when the attack began. As Corvan energy beams lanced toward the station, Jake felt something awaken in his mind. The architect enhancements that had been growing stronger suddenly blazed to life. "All hands, this is Morrison," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Evacuate the mining platforms now. Move with purpose, but don't panic." The evacuation should have taken hours. Instead, it happened in minutes. Workers seemed to anticipate each other's movements, coordinating without speaking. Ships launched in perfect formation, despite having no time to plan. Jake himself was coordinating the rescue from the control room when he realized he wasn't using the communication systems anymore. Somehow, he was directly connecting with the minds of other humans, sharing information instantly across vast distances. "What's happening to us?" asked Dr. Lisa Kane, who was helping coordinate the evacuation. She could feel the same strange connection, as if all the humans in the area were becoming part of a larger whole. "The architect enhancements," Jake said. "The stress of the attack is triggering something they built into our genetics. We're becoming more than we were." The effect spread as news of the attacks reached other human worlds. On Earth, Dr. Pete Collins felt his consciousness expand as he linked with research teams across the planet. On Mars, Ambassador Helen Torres found herself coordinating with diplomatic contacts throughout human space without using any communication equipment. But the biggest surprise came during the main battle near Earth. Admiral Wright's fleet was hopelessly outnumbered, facing certain destruction as the Corvan armada closed in. The human ships should have been wiped out in the first exchange of fire. Instead, they began moving like a single organism. Ships that had never worked together before flew in perfect formation. Damaged vessels were instantly supported by others, creating overlapping shields and coordinated attacks that confused the enemy. "This is impossible," War Master Thekron growled as he watched his superior forces struggle against the much smaller human fleet. "They're coordinating faster than our communication systems can track." The truth was even stranger than he realized. The human crews weren't communicating at all in the traditional sense. Their enhanced minds were sharing information directly, creating a form of group consciousness that allowed instant coordination across the entire fleet. Captain Morrison, now aboard his ship in the thick of the battle, found he could sense the intentions of every Corvan vessel before they acted. When enemy ships moved to attack, human ships were already repositioning to counter them. "Jake, what's happening to us?" Admiral Wright asked during a brief lull in the fighting. She could feel her own consciousness touching the minds of thousands of other humans across the solar system. "We're evolving," Jake replied. "The architects didn't just leave us technology. They left us the potential to become something greater. The stress of this battle is unlocking abilities we never knew we had." The tide of battle began to turn as the human fleet adapted to their new capabilities. But the most important moment came when the Corvan flagship broke through the defensive lines and aimed its massive weapons at Earth itself. Jake felt the planet's dormant defense systems calling to him. Ancient architect installations hidden throughout the solar system suddenly came online, responding to his enhanced consciousness. Weapons platforms that had slept for millions of years awakened, creating an impenetrable shield around humanity's homeworld. The energy barrier that formed around Earth was unlike anything seen in galactic history. The Corvan flagship's most powerful weapons couldn't scratch it. War Master Thekron stared in shock as his victory turned into defeat. But the moment that truly changed everything came next. As the Corvan fleet retreated, damaged and defeated, human ships moved to pursue them. Jake felt the collective will of humanity pushing for revenge, for the complete destruction of their attackers. Instead, He made a different choice. All human ships, ceasefire, he broadcast. Offer medical assistance to damaged enemy vessels. Are you insane? Came a reply from one of the human captains. They tried to destroy us, and now they're defeated. Killing them won't make us safer. Showing mercy might make us stronger. Across the galaxy, other species watched in amazement as human ships moved to help their former enemies. Corvan vessels that should have been destroyed were instead rescued. Wounded alien soldiers were brought aboard human medical ships and treated with the same care as human casualties. On the Hegemony Council ship, Ambassador Zara of the Nexus Collective watched the battle reports with growing wonder. Prime Minister Zektar, are you seeing this? The humans had the power to destroy the Corvan fleet completely, but they chose mercy instead. Zektar, the gray-skinned leader who had first delivered the ultimatum to humanity, nodded slowly. Perhaps the architects saw something in them that we missed. Any species can win a battle through strength. Few can win through compassion. The effect rippled through the galaxy as news of the battle spread. Several hegemony species that had supported the Corvan attack began to reconsider their position. The Zelani, who had remained neutral throughout the trials, officially recognized humanity's claim to the architect inheritance. Even some Corvans began to question their leaders. Commander Vexel, who had served under War Master Thekron for decades, watched human medical teams treating his wounded comrades and felt something he had never experienced before. These humans, who should have been celebrating victory over their enemies, were instead risking their own lives to save Corvan. Soldiers. War Master Thekron, his flagship limping away from Earth, stared at the tactical displays in bitter defeat. He had thrown everything at humanity and failed. Worse, he had proven that the architect's choice was correct. These strange, soft creatures from a small world had shown wisdom and strength that his own warrior culture could never match. As the immediate crisis passed, Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship and felt the enhanced consciousness of humanity settling into a new pattern. They were still human, still individuals, but they were also something more. The architects had given them the tools to become worthy guardians of galactic civilization. The trials were over. Humanity had proven themselves not through conquest, but through sacrifice. The galaxy would never be the same. President Karen Walsh stood in the newly built conference room on Luna Station, looking out at representatives from over 50 alien species. The Emergency Galactic Council session had been called to decide humanity's future, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. 6 months had passed since the Corvan attack on Earth. The galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened during that battle. How had humans suddenly developed abilities that seemed almost magical? How had they coordinated their defense without any visible communication? And most importantly, what did it mean for the future of galactic civilization? The question before us is simple, announced Prime Minister Zektar from his position at the center of the Great Circular Chamber. Do we officially recognize humanity as the inheritors of the architect legacy, or do we consider them a threat that must be contained? Ambassador Helen Torres sat at the human delegation table, her enhanced senses picking up emotional undercurrents from dozens of different species. The architect changes had affected her too, making her incredibly sensitive to the feelings and intentions of others. Right now she could feel fear, curiosity, anger, and hope all swirling together in the alien minds around her. The humans have completed all required trials, spoke Ambassador Zara of the Nexus Collective. Her crystalline form shifted colors as she addressed the assembly. They have shown wisdom, compassion, and restraint even when facing extinction. According to ancient law, they have earned the right to the architect inheritance. War Master Thekron, his scarred face showing barely controlled rage, stood to respond. Despite his defeat, he still commanded respect among the more militant species. They have shown powers that no natural species should possess. These enhancements make them a danger to all other life in the galaxy. As opposed to your empire, which has been invading and conquering for centuries? Helen asked calmly. Her words carried across the chamber with perfect clarity, enhanced by abilities she was still learning to control. Dr. Pete Collins was not at the council meeting. Instead, he was deep underground on Earth, in the largest architect installation ever discovered. The ancient AI construct called Prometheus had finally agreed to reveal the full scope of the inheritance, and what Pete learned changed everything. The architects did not simply leave technology for humanity, Prometheus explained, its voice echoing in Pete's enhanced consciousness. They left responsibility. The tools you have inherited can reshape reality itself, but they come with a price. Pete felt knowledge flowing into his mind, concepts so vast and complex that his normal human brain could never have grasped them. What kind of responsibility? The same responsibility the architects carried for millions of years, to guide younger species without controlling them, to protect without dominating, to share knowledge without creating dependence. The implications hit Pete like a physical blow. You're saying humanity is supposed to become the new architects? To watch over the galaxy the way they watched over us? Not as the architects were, but as humanity can be. Each species that inherits this legacy does so in their own way. The architects were logical and patient. Humanity is emotional and dynamic. Both approaches have value. Pete thought about the enhanced humans he had seen since the battle. Jake Morrison could interface with any technology just by touching it. Lisa Kane could understand any language or culture within minutes of exposure. Helen Torres could read the emotional states of entire rooms full of people. But we're not ready for that kind of power, Pete said. We can barely manage our own world, let alone guide other species. The architects did not choose you because you were ready, Prometheus replied. They chose you because you have the potential to grow into worthiness. Every species they guided was given the same choice. Most failed. Humanity succeeded because you chose cooperation over conquest, mercy over revenge. Back at the Galactic Council, the debate was reaching a critical point. Speaker after speaker had risen to give their opinion on humanity's worthiness. Some praised their accomplishments during the trials. Others worried about their rapid development and growing abilities. President Walsh finally stood to address the assembly. She was an older woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but her voice carried the authority of someone who had led humanity through its most difficult period. I understand your concerns, she said, her words reaching every corner of the vast chamber. Humanity has changed rapidly since we discovered the architect legacy. We have abilities now that we're still learning to understand and control. But I want to make something clear to all of you. She paused, looking around the room at the diverse collection of alien faces. We did not ask to be chosen. We did not seek this responsibility. But we will not run from it either. The architects selected humanity not because we were perfect, but because we could learn from our mistakes and grow beyond them. A murmur ran through the assembly. Many of the aliens had expected humans to demand recognition or threaten consequences if they were denied. Instead, Walsh was offering something different. We proposed the creation of a new organization, Walsh continued. Not a human empire or a replacement for the hegemony, but a partnership. The Terran Protectorate will be dedicated to helping younger species develop safely, protecting them from the mistakes that have destroyed so many civilizations in the past. Ambassador Torres stood to add details. Membership in the Protectorate will be voluntary. We will not impose our values or systems on anyone. Our role will be to offer guidance when asked, protection when needed, and knowledge when it can help. The room erupted in discussion. Some species were intrigued by the proposal, while others remained suspicious. War Master Thekron looked furious at the idea of humans positioning themselves as galactic guardians. Dr. Collins emerged from the architect installation with news that would change the debate forever. He contacted the council session through quantum communication, his enhanced consciousness allowing him to speak directly to every mind in the chamber. The architects are not gone, he announced, his mental voice carrying perfect clarity to hundreds of different species. They transcended physical existence millions of years ago. They still watch, still guide, but from a level of reality we can barely comprehend. The council chamber fell silent. Even the most skeptical representatives were stunned by this revelation. Pete's consciousness touched theirs again. They approve of humanity's proposal. The Protectorate represents the next step in galactic evolution, not rule by the strongest or the oldest, but guidance by those who understand that true strength comes from lifting others up. The vote, when it finally came, was closer than many expected. 63% of the Galactic Council voted to recognize humanity's inheritance and approve the formation of the Terran Protectorate. It was enough to make it official, but not enough to prevent future challenges. Jake Morrison was chosen as the first Protector General, his enhanced abilities making him ideally suited to coordinate between human and alien minds. His first mission was to establish Protectorate stations throughout the galaxy, each one staffed by humans and aliens working together. The changes came slowly at first. Young species that had been struggling with basic space travel suddenly found themselves receiving gentle guidance from Protectorate advisors. Conflicts that might have escalated into wars were resolved through mediation and understanding. On Earth, children who carried the architect genetic markers began showing up in schools around the world. They were still human, still children, but they demonstrated abilities that their parents could barely understand. They could communicate with alien students through emotional connection rather than language. They instinctively understood complex scientific concepts that had taken earlier generations decades to discover. Dr. Lisa Kane established the first Protectorate Academy on Mars, where human and alien children learned together. The curriculum focused not just on technology and science, but on empathy, wisdom, and the responsibilities that came with power. The architects gave us tools, Lisa explained to her first class of mixed species students. But tools are only as good as the hands that wield them and the hearts that guide them. Your generation will inherit a galaxy where cooperation is possible, where differences are celebrated rather than feared. The Corvan Empire remained hostile, but they were no longer the threat they once were. Many younger Corvans had been influenced by humanity's example during the battle at Earth. They began questioning their culture's emphasis on strength through domination. Commander Vexel, the former Corvan officer who had witnessed human mercy firsthand, established the first Corvan colony to join the Protectorate. It was a small gesture, but it represented hope for change, even among humanity's former enemies. As Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, now the flagship of the Protectorate fleet, he reflected on how much had changed since that first discovery in the crystal field. Humanity had gone from a small, struggling species to the guardians of galactic civilization, but the greatest change was not in their technology or their abilities. It was in their understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. The architects had chosen well. They had seen in humanity not what they were, but what they could become.